Hi, this is Jerry Bowyer for the Eagle Investing Network. Did you hit subscribe yet? Do it now. And while you're hitting subscribe, I'm going to talk to you about the single most important statistic which measures the size and strength of the U.S. economy. It's called gross output. You've probably heard of GDP. I mean, if you watch financial news, then you hear a lot about GDP. We just had GDP shrink 1.4%, which means we might have already entered a recession. Well, GDP is fine, but it's not perfect. It could be better. GDP, gross domestic product, essentially is a measure of spending, not of production. But you know, as investors, that production is what really drives the economy. If it's not produced, it can't be consumed. So consumption isn't what drives the economy. Production is what drives the economy. Production makes consumption possible, not the other way around. Well, my friend Mark Skousen, who's a colleague here at Eagle, created the gross output metric. Metric is just a way economists say statistic. A gross output looks at the entire economy. Steve Forbes says it's a CAT scan of the economy, meaning three-dimensional rather than an X-ray. Let's take a look at gross output. Let's take a look at that. We're going back to about 2005. The orange is gross output. The blue is GDP. And this is percent change. So when it's above that zero line, it's going up. And when it's below the zero line, I see that it went down with COVID and then it came back very strongly. As you can see, usually the orange moves around more. It's more volatile. Well, that's good. We want that. We want signal. We want something to change so we can see that something's coming. So there's something that's very important to realize, which is that consumers basically stay pretty stable. You spend based on what class you perceive yourself to be in or how you were raised or what your value system is. But people in business increase production or decrease production. They increase inventory or decrease inventory based on what they think is going to happen. They have to be very agile. So what you see here is, this goes down more, this comes back more, and also it tends to lead. This is a point that Dr. Skousen has made a number of times. When the orange is above the blue, then we tend to get spikes in the blue later. In other words, gross output is a leading indicator. And we saw here gross output was considerably higher than GDP. And what happened? GDP went up after that. Then we saw gross output go down. See, right? Gross output was weaker. Here, gross output is under GDP. That's last year. And what happened? Well, we just found out this year that GDP was actually negative. So generally, when the gross output is higher than GDP, in the next quarter or two, you're going to have things getting better. In other words, business kind of knows what's going to happen. Business leaders are pretty smart. They've got skin in the game. And if they're increasing production, they probably have a good reason to do it. Or if they're decreasing production, they probably have a good reason to do that. All right, I want you to look here at this gap. This is going to be important when the gross output, which includes business, is growing faster than the rest of the economy. Again, a sign of something going better in the future. Okay, so now there's something very important. What we're going to do here is we're going to take that gross output. We're going to take out the spending. Gross output's the entire economy. We're going to take out the spending and we're going to take out the government. And what's left behind is business. And we really want to know what's going on with business. So let's look at the data for that, shall we? So the green, think of green money, that's business. Orange is still gross output. So business, supply chain's another way to say it. Supply chain is something we've been hearing a lot about. Well, let me tell you, anybody who was paying attention to gross output knew about the supply chain crisis before anybody else. For example, look at that right here. The entire economy is growing a lot. Supply chain not growing as much. The supply chain was struggling to keep up with the entire economy. And what happened? What did we get? We got a supply chain crisis. And then it kind of healed. See, supply chain was actually growing faster than the economy, and supply chain healed a little bit. It was kind of on again, off again with different strains of COVID. And then we have a situation where, again, we had a little bit of supply chain having the supply chain having a little bit of trouble keeping up. And then supply chain comes back strongly. more strongly than the economy. And that's why largely we've seen the supply chain problem get a lot better. It's not perfect. We're going to look in a bit in a future video at inventory, and we're going to see that the supply chain problem got very bad around the fall of 2021 as largely started to heal after that. Now, of course, we don't know the future. We don't know if there's going to be another strain of COVID and the Chinese economy will shut down. We don't know if there will be other crises. But as of now, what we've seen is a situation where the supply chain situation has healed a lot. Most people were able to get most of the gifts that they wanted for Christmas. So what's showing up now is inflation. And the way the economy works is, unless government applies price controls, inflation causes production increases. Business produces more of what they can sell at a higher price. All right, so we're going to come back in a future video. So that's supply chain. That's kind of your introduction to gross output, how gross output helped us or would have helped people predict the recovery, how it helped us predict the decrease, the contraction that we're in as of the first quarter of this year. And next, we're going to look at inventory and see exactly how the supply chain crisis rolled out and exactly how it healed and what might go wrong. Okay, I'm Jerry Bowyer. This is the Eagle Investing Network. Did you hit subscribe yet? If you haven't, hit subscribe now. If you already hit subscribe, then share this with somebody else who you think would benefit from having a deeper understanding of the economy. I'm Jerry Bowyer. Thanks for joining us.